Oh, what's up, buddy?
I have like, oh, hi, puppy. I have breadcrumb trails in my head that help me remember things. And for some reason, I haven't built one for Vanderbilt that doesn't get eaten. I start on my breadcrumb path and like it just disappears.
Well, what might help with some context in terms of like autism research, Vanderbilt's been the home for many years of Triad, which is at the Vanderbilt Kennedy Center, which is a part of Vanderbilt. Triad, I'm sorry, I don't remember what the acronym stands for, but basically they've been doing autism research, mostly focused on children for the last few decades. And so Vanderbilt was already a bit of one of those research institutions where we have a lot of experts and stuff that kind of focus on that. And then for the past 5 years, the Frist Center has been taking a close look at the adult side of things, particularly as it relates to employment. So we have a lot of research teams doing a lot of autism-related research, as well as some partnerships with like Yale and Stanford and UC Berkeley and stuff like that.
That's great. I'll give you opportunity to say all of that again, officially. But we can talk about, these are all very casual and they tend to be beautiful expressions of ADD, because all of us tend to like get very excited about like some tangent and we run away on the tangent. But you know, certainly your work at Vanderbilt, but if you want to talk about yourself, your parenting, any of those things, those are really, really welcome.
Okay. In a direction, and I'll go sprinting off in that direction.
Yes, I am a very happy Labrador. I am food motivated and I chase shiny things.
That's one of the upsides of sensory seeking. Yeah, it's in fact, I feel like everything you're describing is a two-edged sword, but you're talking about the nice side of that two-edged sword.
Right.
We can feel things so intensely, and that means when we can be happy, we can be really happy. And when we enjoy something, we can really enjoy that thing. You know, there are some days I will bite into a piece of chocolate and I weep for the rest of the world because it doesn't taste as good to them as it does to me.
Yeah.
And you learn to hold on to those moments, because on the flip side of that, you know, if you have a negative emotion or a negative feeling, that can also be highly amplified and can be very problematic. But I feel like two sides of the same coin.
I think I'm going to snippet that out, and that little blip you just said is probably going to go out to the world to help advertise Innis, because that was really beautiful and perfect. It's something that I talk about a lot with folks, that I will use the sort of superpower language around autism and ADHD, but I always talk about it in terms of yin and yang. Yeah. That the exact same thing that gives me my brilliant brain, and I love my brilliant brain, is the same thing that also perpetuates my PTSD.
Right.
And so, yeah, it is the constant learning how to manage and create cooperation between our yin and yang sides, our lights and our darks and our grays and our, you know, rainbows and all of the things that we are. And I think that's one of the things that can be difficult for folks to understand. Yeah. Even if they're neurodivergent, but maybe not a multi-layered neurodivergent. When you're multi-layered neurodivergent, I think you're a type of extra. It's just like, you're extra in all directions, right? When you're quiet, like you're extra quiet and people are like, you okay? You're like really quiet. Like there's something about our aura or our presence or something that like people feel like you're like in every way we are extra. We can't even be quiet without extra.
We have a habit of emotionally shouting. So whatever mood we're in, it can almost be overwhelming for people, even like people within the neural majority. Sometimes it can be overwhelming to be around somebody who's having a really intense emotional state, because we don't do a good job of masking that sometimes, because we're partially like unaware of how much we're broadcasting. But when I meet an autistic person who is like broadcasting all of that, is emotionally shouting, I'm appreciative because I don't have to wonder what that person's feeling or something. I feel like I can really read that person and understand, you know, what they're going through and stuff. Which I think makes my own emotional shouting even worse at times. I have to be careful about that because I have to remind myself that can be intense for some people, and it can be off-putting for some people, or it can be disturbing for some people. And it's hard when you're in that moment. It's really hard to recognize how much you're broadcasting and trying to dial it. I think it's another reason why when we get quiet, we get like super quiet. Because at some level, we're just not trying to rock the boat too much, where we're like upsetting and disturbing people.
Yeah, I think understanding the difference between masking and working to appropriately accommodate those in our presence.
Yeah.
Right? We don't have to hide who we are. We don't have to not be who we are, but we should be compassionately aware of those we're with.
Yeah.
Where masking is an attempt to not be ourselves and to be like something we are not.
Right.
Moderation. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you stay true to yourself so you can be your authentic self while also being respectful of people? That's not an easy or trivial question to answer. And it takes a lot of work and effort. And the big thing I stress for the people in my life is that, look, I will work really hard on this. I promise you that. In exchange, please understand that's really hard for me and I'm going to make mistakes. And so I ask from you a little patience and understanding and some feedback, and we'll find a path forward. And the people in my life are people who were willing to do that and put force in that. And for most of them, it's not a sales pitch anymore because they see the benefits of that. They get me, they understand me. They understand at my core I'm a decent human being and that sometimes I will be extra and too much. They can even call me back in and rein me in. We've sort of like worked out a way to sort of like effectively communicate that. And as we get better to understanding each other and how we communicate, we have these like really positive, beneficial relationships that have these dark spots, these moments of conflict and stuff. But that's true of all human relationships and stuff. You know, it's not, the goal is not to find the perfect relationship where you never have conflict with someone, but rather someone who, when you do have conflict, we can work it out in a way that we're both respectful of one another's feelings and emotions, and we're trying to look out for each other and help each other. And I think that's something that unites all of us as human beings, is that we all have, whether we realize it or not, a very powerful drive to have that and to be a part of that. And when you have that, your life is just so much richer and much more fulfilling and stuff. And when you don't have that, and a lot of autistic people don't have that, from a mental health perspective, that's a really dark place to live.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the reasons why I advocate so hard for neurodivergence to be seen as a set of neurotypes instead of a set of disabilities and disorders is that we cannot, in my opinion, we cannot research appropriately if we're starting with a thing we believe needs fixing.
Right.
We cannot find true life success paths if we're constantly in the mindset that somebody is fundamentally flawed.
Right.
And so, yeah, when folks have a harder time of adjusting for a moment, right now there's criticism for that. There's, you know, that it is up to the autistic person to adjust. It is up to the ADHD person to adjust. And I'm working awfully hard through this conference and my other work to try to help people desire a world that everyone's needs and supports. And, you know, it's not just autistic people who need things. It's not just Tourette's people that need things. It's not, you know, it's not just people in wheelchairs that need things. Actually, everybody needs something.
Right.
And what if we built a construct in our attitudes about what it is to be human, that making room for one another it is the preference.
With everybody pitching in and everybody like participating. Yeah, I think anytime you ask one group to do all the work and let the other group just sit back, that's not fair. It not only is it not fair, I don't think it's very viable. One group invariably ends up suffering from that. The goal is that we all try to work. I try to work to understand you and accommodate you. You try to work to understand me and accommodate me. And we're going to meet somewhere in the middle and find a way to interact with each other in a positive way and an effective means of communication. And then once we find that, great things start happening. Like life gets a whole lot better when we get there.
Yeah. I like the analogy of, I call it a teeter-totter. Some people call it a seesaw. And then, I don't know, maybe they call it other things in other countries, but it's the, it's the playground toy where somebody sits on this and somebody, and you go like this, right? If you are of different weights, somebody may have to sit a little closer and you can still do the thing, right? Like if it's a little child and a full-grown adult, that full-grown adult may need to be almost entirely to the balance point, right? They're here and the little one's out here, but they can still do the thing. And to me, that's a way to think about, what a truly inclusive and accommodating perspective is. Yeah, almost always there's going to be a weight difference.
Right.
In needs, in abilities, in capacities. There's always going to be a weight difference. But there's likely to be a way to adjust to one another so that evens out a little bit. We can still do the thing.
Yeah, I like that analogy a lot.
Thanks. So
I'm probably stealing that analogy.
Okay.
That's a really clever way to sort of think about it. And there's a lot of layers of truth kind of like just buried into that seemingly simple analogy. I like that a lot because it also calls attention to the fact that one person might have a better capacity to try and find a balance with this person than the other person. I often stress when I'm talking to people and trying to educate them about autism is that you can't use me as a benchmark. I'm a very eloquent sort of person. I'm pretty good at putting things in language that people understand. I speak fairly well. And in that regard, I represent a tiny minority of the autism spectrum. 40% of people on the autism spectrum are nonverbal or minimally verbal. And then a majority of them have some difficulty with verbal communication and stuff. I know some people who are just brilliant, can handle a dozen projects at once and just do amazing work every time. And they might struggle for 30 seconds to put together a simple sentence. And when people hear them talking, they just assume, oh, there's not much going on upstairs. No, it's not that. It's a disability where they're just struggling to kind of find the language and stuff. One of the most powerful things I heard from that 60 Minutes bit that they did about us a couple of years ago, they were asking some autistic adults working, if there's one thing you wanted people to know about autism, what would it be? And this one girl put it so well. She said, please don't judge my intelligence based on my ability to talk. That's and your analogy just does such a beautiful job of, someone might be more of a lightweight, might have to work a lot harder. So it's kind of incumbent on the other person to kind of recognize that and kind of shift appropriately and not just demand that we both set the same distance from the fulcrum. Because then one of us is just going to be up in the air all the time. The other one's going to be sitting on the ground.
Yeah. And I think that's where we find quite a bit of even really well-intentioned accommodation and inclusion efforts is, as long as you come in and blend with us, we'll make room for you, right? So I've done a bunch of contract work and stuff like that for different organizations. And before I understood my own identity as a neurodivergent person, and before I really got better educated in this world, I didn't understand what my needs were. I knew that it was really hard for me to work in the cubes, right? The little beigey. Yeah, that's really hard for me. But then sometimes it was like safety. The cube was safe, right? Like I'd like tuck in there and right. Like, but I didn't know what was going on with that. I didn't understand why sometimes I could be around everybody, sometimes I could not be around everybody. Sometimes everybody else's noises were the thing that helped me focus, and sometimes everybody else's noises were making me insane and I needed to go like cry in the bathroom. I just didn't understand.
Mhm.
And I think one of the things that a truly inclusive and accommodating atmosphere does when we're thinking about everyone, we're not just including a stereotypical disabled persona, right? That I don't know if you've ever sat in on, write your target audience, right? Describe your target audience. You create these in marketing, you create these pretend people that you're talking to, right? I kind of feel like that's a lot of what happens in diversity, equity, and inclusion work is we create pretend personas. And then we try to do things to accommodate something we have created. I think research has done that, right? When research isn't pulling in the actually autistic community, the actual ADHD, right? When neurodivergents are not included in this, the structuring, the dreaming up of, the theorizing, all of it, when it comes to research, we're researching a mythical creature. We're not researching actual human beings and their experience. And so I think, yeah, this inclusion work really needs to be something that says, what is the tide that will raise all boats, right? What is the thing that will certainly scoop up those who most obviously need it,
Mhm.
but will also benefit people who will come into that space and be like, I didn't know I needed this. Like, yes, I was neurodivergent and didn't know it, but I wouldn't have known I needed a thing until I tripped over it.
Right.
And I think a lot of people have that experience, whether they're neurodivergent or not. They come to an experience and it's good, and their mind is opened to, wow, I actually could have a nicer life. If something were adjusted, if something were a little different, I could have a nicer life.
Yeah.
And then we're not bumping into, I get a lot, especially because like you, Dave, I'm most of the time fairly verbal. I can explain things. I can, right? I don't, people cock their head when I say I'm autistic, right? Well, you don't seem autistic. You don't really, right? Unless somebody knows and they've known me for a long time. Like when I started telling people who've known me since childhood, they're like, that makes so much sense, right? I have been forgiven so much, like rule insisting and mothering and all kinds of things that people used as criticisms against me because people figured out I was autistic, and that like my brain just was like, but the rules, right? I'm just trying to keep everybody like happy and safe. I hate the rules. I don't like them, but they're there and we have to, right? The whole like, and people from like, high school and stuff, once they figured out, they're like, oh, yeah, that makes so much sense. But things that would have worked for me would have also benefited them. A greater variety of places in which to rest, work, play, be. I'm involved with local organizations that do networking. And I've started talking to them about how the standard networking where you go to a bar and it's a little loud and visually and there's a lot of sensory stuff. I don't know how good that is for networking, period, because you can't hear people well. But there's so many people at networking events that still like stick to the wall or their chair or their like stool at the bar, right? They're still very withdrawn. They're not participating in the networking event because that event is designed the way they've sort of always been done. There's not a fresh thought. Well, what actually would benefit everybody in terms of what a networking event is for, right? Yeah, we've always done it this way. We always go to a bar. We always have, you know, food and lots of people and noise and music and weird lights, and that's just the way it is. That's fun, right? No. No. Yeah, but I think there are a lot of people in those environments, neurodivergent or not, that feel the same way. It's not a thing that works for them.
Mm-hmm.
And when we can start thinking beyond what we normally do and asking everybody to accommodate to the history, right? It's always been this way, so come to the history and do the history. Okay, I understand that's the way it's been done, and there have been some really good working things about it. Can we do it better? Right? We don't have to throw it all out, but could we do it better? Is there something that helps the shy person? Is there something that helps the sensorily overloaded person? Is there something that helps the new person? And can we think that way? So yeah, evidently we're just gonna do our thing different, right? We've already talked for half an hour and we haven't introduced ourselves or anything. So it's beautiful. I love it. So maybe I should at this point say who you are and why we're talking, because you and I will just keep talking and having lots and lots of fun. I'm Dawn Marie Solis, and I'm with INNIS 2022, and I'm obviously so freaking excited to be talking to Dr. Dave Caudel. He is an autistic adult and an advocate for neurodivergent individuals. He also does autism research, and he's at Vanderbilt University doing some incredible stuff. He came from the world of physics. I love that part of your story. And he's also a parent of 3 wonderful young adults who are also on the spectrum. Me too. So yeah, this is just really exciting. And I say often that I fall in love very, very easily. I find all of humanity super exciting and wonderful. And I just instantly get so happy when people will talk to me about themselves. So I've been loving this work for the conference, because I just get to get online with brilliant, beautiful people and like have fun conversations, which obviously you and I have been doing for the last half an hour. But I do want to make sure that people have a chance to hear from you, like who you are, what you're doing, what you're passionate about in this space. So I'm going to make every attempt to be quiet for at least a small amount of time.
Well, you know, I tried my hand at a variety of jobs and stuff, just trying to find my fit in the world. Most of the careers I had, all of my weaknesses were constantly being called out and criticized. I was constantly being criticized and derided for not being good at the things that are really hard for me. And then I struggled really hard to poorly imitate what some people can just do naturally. And none of my strengths seemed to matter that much to people. It wasn't until I gave this college thing a try and discovered physics. That was the first time I found a place where all of my strengths were valued and none of my weaknesses mattered that much. You can be a physicist and you can be a weird person. It's almost like, you know, I remember when I first moved to this part of town and I would go out shopping, people would see my long hair and they would come up to me and go, are you a musician? I'd go, no, I'm a physicist. And they go, oh. Like those are one of the 2 acceptable answers for being like a weird, unusual person. But I really sort of thrived in that place. And so physics very much was my passion. But it was at the same time that I got my autism diagnosis. And that changed my perception of reality. It changed my understanding of the world and where I fit in the world. I discovered that I have a people. I have a tribe. There are other human beings out there who have the same sorts of struggles I have. That's not anything I ever would have guessed at. And as soon as I discovered that, I found immediately like a really strong sort of connection. And, you know, the idea that anybody would have to go through a fraction of what I had to go through just breaks my heart. Nobody should have to go through that. You know, I like to explain to people that, like, look, as an autistic person, in more ways than not, I'm a human being with all the complexity and nuances that brings. But in some very important fundamental ways, I'm wired differently than most people. So I think about things differently than most people. I use language differently than most people. I react to situations differently than most people. And when you're like that, anyone who's neurodivergent, this is why I'm a neurodivergence advocate, not just an autism advocate, because even if you're weird, your flavor of weird is different than my flavor of weird. Something we have in common is that we're a minority within the population. And when you're wired differently, sometimes what works well for most people does not work well for you. And in some situations, it's actually harmful to you. So we, as neurodivergent adults, we really struggle, particularly in our early years, trying to find a way to make our weirdness work in this world and find a way to get the system to serve us the way it serves other people. And oftentimes there's nobody there to walk us through how to do that or how to make the adjustments and stuff. And so oftentimes very painfully, we try to figure all that out ourselves. So when I got an opportunity to work in a center to help autistic adults and do autism research, I couldn't say no, even though at the time it terrified me when they offered me the job. I immediately said yes. And then I mentally crapped myself because I just spent 10 years preparing to be a physicist. And I would have been a happy, blissful physicist. I could have done physics research the rest of my life, and that would have fed some core obsessions in me. I would be doing something I'm passionate. I would be doing something that I have some natural talents towards, so I get a chance to like really lean on my strengths and come to work from a strengths-based perspective. Once I had that, I didn't want to have anything else. But autism research sort of like hits the same scratches. It hits the same itches. Because we're talking about a population that needs a lot of love and a lot of help and stuff. And historically, our society has not done a good job serving people who are neurodivergent. So it's my other passion. My passions are like physics and autism and neurodivergence advocacy. So, you know, I love the work that I do. I just like you, one of the highlights of my job is like I get to talk to people all the time, autistic adults, neurodivergent adults. Sometimes these are people who have figured out things I haven't figured out yet. And so what a joy to kind of learn from them and stuff. I get to hear echoes of my own life and their stories and their perspectives and their struggles and stuff. And that gives me an opportunity to connect on a level with other human beings that historically for much of my life, I never had that. Once I started getting that, I was like, oh my gosh, like I finally got why people seem so obsessed with getting in cliques and tribes and stuff. Because when you're with people that you can connect with on that level, it feeds something very vital in the human condition and stuff. It gives you, you know, we're a herd species by nature. When we're working together and we're taking advantage of one another's strength and supporting one another through our weaknesses and stuff and working as a group, as a collective, we're just capable of so much more than what we could do individually and stuff. So I have a obnoxiously, almost sickeningly wonderful life where I get paid to do me, and I get to help folks, which I love to do, and I get to learn, which I love to do, and I get to help try and answer some of these unanswered questions about autism and how do we accommodate and include folks from a strengths-based perspective? How do we help them find, succeed at, and thrive in meaningful employment? Because all of us, all human beings, that speaks to something very fundamentally that we all need to be successful and to just be healthy and happy. But as a society as a whole, society itself, they want you in the right sort of job where you can be you and you're really good at that. And if you need some accommodations and supports to thrive and be successful, that's a reasonable ask for what you're giving in return. Just being a wonderful person and, like, you know, benefiting the people around you and being a part of our society. So it's to be involved in that sort of work is I didn't realize how badly I wanted it until I had it. And so I'm going to do this the rest of my life. I can tell you that right now. I've been doing this for 5 years. I've been keeping an eye out. Am I going to get bored? Is it going to get frustrated? Is it going to be overwhelming? Well, it is going to be overwhelming. It is frequently sort of overwhelming. But when you're doing something that has a potential benefit for so many people, overwhelming is a small price to pay, you know? And I'm not overwhelmed all the time. And I have safety mechanisms and stuff to protect my own mental health. I get well accommodated in my work environment and stuff. And that's one of the reasons why I'm able to do what I can do.
That's such an important point, and something that I'm working hard on right now is trying to help people think differently about a job. Like, like I was just saying a little bit ago, a job that's been done the same way all the time, right? No matter who's in the job, they do it the same way. So, 10 years ago, if you were checking out your groceries, you would have been very unlikely to see somebody sitting on a stool, because sitting as a grocery clerk, for whatever reason, was deemed inappropriate. But now, sometimes you see somebody sitting on a stool. Now, sometimes you see grocery clerks with ear protection. Now, sometimes, right, little bit by little bit, we're starting to see that very repeatable set of circumstances. A grocery clerk, right? Everybody who's a grocery clerk is doing relatively the same job, whether you're here or you're in Great Britain or you're, someplace else. If you're helping people purchase and pay for their groceries, you're doing relatively the same work, no matter where you are. But now there's room for different types of people to be themselves, instead of being in pain, being stressed out, right? All of the things that people were expected to just deal with quietly. Don't bring your life to work, right? Now we're seeing, so how do we help business owners reimagine work that looks like it's not reimaginable, right?
Right.
A position like yours where we can kind of go, well, okay, we could probably do research at 11 o'clock at night. No, but right, because you're not customer based in the same kind of way. You don't have the same kind of requirements on your work, and we can expand our thought of what accommodation and inclusion looks like in your kind of job. However, the average professor may feel like they need to fit a particular standard, right? But we're seeing many universities include a lot more evening, even late evening classes, right? They start at 8 and 9 o'clock at night, because there's a whole population that needs that. We're starting to even think differently about when we educate, at least the adult. Unfortunately, not so much the child yet, but at least the adult. So how do we think more expansively about jobs that don't immediately strike us as so flexible? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, this is one of the things that we're exceptionally fortunate. The Frist Center for Autism and Innovation, we're so fortunate to be in the position that we're in and able to do the sorts of things that we do. So we have research teams from multiple schools, not just the School of Psychology, but the Department of Engineering, the business school, who are looking at that very issue from different directions. How do we train the next generation of leaders and supervisors to be more inclusive and accommodating? What sort of changes do we make to the workplace to sort of optimize it and make it more inclusive for these sorts of people? What sort of technologies and innovations can we give people to help make their lives easier or better? And even like just the bare nuts and bolts about, as we were talking about earlier, research for decades has been looking at autism and a lot of neurodivergences from the perspective of what's wrong with you, what's defective about you. And in recent years, we've started to realize as a research community, that's a sort of one-sided view on that. And one of the things that's been really exciting for the past 5 years is more and more I've seen researchers make two pivots. One is, well, what about the strengths? What about the capabilities? What are the things that these folks can do as well, if not better than most people? And then how could we match those to jobs or something? They're starting to take more of a strengths-based approach. And more, they're starting to recognize the value of, if we're going to do research in autism, gosh, it would be really nice if we had an autistic researcher with us, or we had some members of that community there as a part of the team, because they're really starting to see value add. No matter how, you could be the most brilliant human being on the planet, But if you don't have that perspective, it might be really hard for you to figure out something that for me would be so painfully obvious because I'm living that perspective. And as we get more and more teams that are doing really effective research, like they're able to better interact with the folks that they're researching, or they design the study in such a way with a mind. And these are some of the things that might actually exclude large parts of the population if we don't account for it. So like sensory issues and social disabilities and stuff like that. And then those research, the research results of that is more impactful and stuff. So you've got that sort of going on. But for me, the real missing piece that most research teams don't have, and this is true for all of research, not just autism research, is more often than not in academia and the research circles, you have experts in a particular field make some important fundamental discovery that we could all benefit from, and it never goes beyond academia. The experts know about it, but nobody else seems to really know about it. We don't, as researchers, we don't do a really good job of educating the public about, this is what I found, let me put it in simple language so it kind of makes sense to you, and it's something that's usable, that you might be able to use to adjust your workplace or whatever. So we also work very closely with a lot of companies and nonprofits and businesses. Initially, it was the companies who were way ahead of the curve, who were like, like Specialist Sterna, over 75% of their employees are on the spectrum. Most of them were people who had never had a career before, never had a full-time job before. Some of them are now been working 10, 15 plus years in what is now their career, making a really good living, being really effective at the job. And these were people that were society viewed as unemployable. So we work with companies like that to figure out, what's your secret sauce? What changes did you make? How did you accommodate these folks? How do you supervise these folks? Some of these folks who've risen up into leadership positions, what did that look like? How did that differ from the standard practice and stuff? Initially, that was most of our partnerships with businesses. Now we've kind of shifted into another phase where we have those partnerships, but more and more, we also have businesses that come to us and say, I want neurodivergent talent, but I have no idea how to do it. What sort of changes do I need to make? So as we're working with those companies, as researchers, we get to also do some science while we're helping them. A lot of times they're getting sort of like free expert advice on best practices and stuff. And so it's a very mutually beneficial sort of partnership. And what I particularly love about that is as those companies become successful, and neurodivergence can really give you a competitive edge. As they start to get a competitive edge over the other companies, sooner or later, the other companies start noticing this, and then they start going, hey, we want to do that too. And that's what I love about that, is it's research that actually results in or helps assist real jobs and real opportunities and real changes to the workplace. And it's my fervent hope that as some of these things get more established, eventually, my goal long term is that I don't want special accommodations for neurodivergent people. I want us to eventually reach a point where that becomes the norm, and that's just good business. I want the workplace. I'm hopeful that 20 years from now, you don't need a neurodivergent hiring initiative or a special program or a special center or something like that, that we've figured out as a society just how to incorporate these folks with everybody else. But that we have a lot of steps to take to kind of get there. And right now, the trajectory that we're on, what we've accomplished in the last 5 years, I'm blown away that we were able to do so much. I'm also salty because it's never enough. I'm a perfectionist by nature, so we can knock out 99% of something, and I'm sitting there going, oh, that other 1%, I wish we could have gotten that. And I have to, if I let that run unchecked, it can actually kind of wreck my mental health. So I always have to do it like a sanity check and say, we're making really good progress. I'm really happy with where we're at. We're nowhere near where we need to be as a society, but we're on a good trajectory. And as long as that continues to happen, wherever you see me, there's going to be a big stupid grin on my face.
I love that. And I'm so thrilled about the work that you're doing. One of the things that I keep thinking about is a foundational goal for INNIS 2022 is the what comes next. I love conferences because I am an info nerd. I if I could just sit at the feet of brilliant people and listen 24/7, a few things would make me as happy. So I love conferences, but I'm constantly frustrated by the lack of what's next. You go, you gather information, you leave. And so I'm really working hard to make sure that there are next steps for anybody who speaks, for anybody who attends, that anyone who's interested in not only continuing the conversation, but finding ways to join together and create opportunities, create change, those sorts of things. So when folks hear from you, you're doing this work, they're going to be like, well, I do this little piece of that work. Maybe, Dr. Dave's people or Dr. Dave or whatever, or maybe Dr. Dave knows somebody, right? So that we can all start making legitimate waves in the water and not just the occasional ripple. Especially what you were talking about in terms of brilliant research is getting done, but it seems hard to disseminate, even when you make a really good effort. And, social media has definitely assisted, because almost every day, because of who I'm tapped into around the world, somebody's releasing a new paper from their, neurodivergent research and things like that. And I'm able to at least know the things that are going on to a certain extent, if they're in my pipeline, but I have no idea what's not in my pipeline, right? Mm-hmm. I might have more access than the average person, but there's still not a good clearinghouse experience for all of the different spaces within neurodivergent research, especially good research. We still have an unfortunate amount of neuromajority led, artificially conceptualized concepts that are then researched and information put out as though it's valid. And it's just really, really unfortunate, and sometimes harmful, the perspectives that people feel they have gained from their research. If you theorize poorly, there is no good outcome for your research. Where you have stood is unstable ground. It's not a sustainable forward path. And that's really hard. It's really hard in the research world. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, because how do we help people who, I believe, for the most part, are trying really hard to do good things? They're researching this stuff from a good place within them. How do we help them understand that they need to kind of check in with the actual people before they run away with their theory and produce research that may literally have no validity and might be harmful in the long run?
So give me just a second.
You're all good.
Those questions that you were just pondering and thinking on, those are the same questions that we've been thinking about since the very beginning. And I don't want to say that we've totally nailed it and we're doing that perfectly, but that's always been on our radar and stuff. So if you go to our website, you'll see that we have a growing body of tools and resources and stuff for a variety of things. I'm always happy to speak to anybody who reaches out to the Frist Center and wants to know more. Sometimes the conversation is all about, someone who's new to the spectrum. They just realize that they're on the spectrum or something, or they're struggling with something, and we're trying to point them towards tools and resources that can kind of help. Sometimes it's somebody who thinks they have a great idea about something that can help some aspect of this issue and stuff, and we kind of work with them to try and vet what we have there and stuff. So some of that results in sort of partnerships and stuff. Some of the things that we vetted that we feel safe to kind of share out there, we're happy to sort of share that out. But that has, from day one, we have always been thinking about, okay, when we find something, how do we then share that with the world? How do we get that to the people that they want? This hasn't changed, but since the beginning, I've noticed that I'll go to someplace in New Jersey and find somebody who has a fantastic little program serving the autistic population within 15 miles of them. And it does a really good job of fitting this need. 30 miles away, there's somebody else trying to reinvent that same wheel, and they don't know about each other, and they're not comparing notes and stuff. And so one of the things that Frist Center tries to do is try to be a clearinghouse for those ideas, try to be a nexus point to allow those people to kind of connect with something, connect with one another and share those. And as we vet something, we start putting that out as, here's a tool that can kind of suit this sort of thing. Here's some training or something like that. We're always thinking about, well, like, for example, we found like a sort of summer camp for autistic teens that kind of teaches them some professional skills and allows them to try their hand at a variety of jobs and to work as a part of a team and conflict resolution, and teaches us a lot of important things that we need to know, that regular people have this amazing ability to just yada yada through without any training. Some stuff that we have to be explicitly taught. It was doing a pretty good job. And we did some research on it. We gathered some data on it, and we could see that, yes, this was having a positive impact on the autistic teens in terms of their career trajectories and stuff. This is something that is going to help push back at that 80% unemployment, underemployment sort of thing. So we took the training, we deconstructed it, we broke it down to its most base elements, and we assembled together facilitator training that anyone anywhere in the world could take that facilitator training, and it's going to teach them, like, hour by hour, day by day, this is how you run this camp. And this is what you stress, and this is how you test them, and this is how you train them, and this is how you support them. And if you follow this instruction guide, you should get the same results wherever you are that we're getting in the lab. And now that's one of the tools up on our site. It's free, open to the public. So anybody who wants to run that facilitator training, that is just one example of the tools and stuff that we're trying to assemble from our research and stuff and share with people. Because we recognize it's not just enough to just publish the research. And I'm proud to say most everything that what we do, they're autistic and neurodivergent, like, researchers and experts involved, self-advocates that are involved. And so we're getting that sort of like multi-dimensional lens put on this to make it as effective and useful as humanly possible.
That's brilliant. I'm so excited to hear about all of that. The struggle of constantly having to reinvent the wheel. Every community, trying to figure out what to do and having no idea there are people out there who have at least found a few ingredients to the special sauce, so that people could connect with the Frist Center and potentially find some of those repeatable avenues. That's brilliant and beautiful. And
that's another reason why I'm always happy to speak with people, because when we added our first tools and resources to our website a few years back, I was so happy that I had something to offer people. You know, I started off with like an empty website where we're making some promises and giving some updates on the news items and stuff, when we could actually start adding to the tools and resources of, yes, this is what we've been aiming for. Now today, we have so many tools and resources that I haven't yet figured out a way to organize it in a way that anyone can just go there and just like instantly find what they need. That's the downside of having a lot of good information, is that it can be challenging to sort of organize it. But I know all that stuff. And so if I connect with you and you're like, oh, you know, I really need help, like I'm trying to design a program to hire autistic folks in, and I'll be like, oh, I have an autism playbook. And let me show you, it's right here under our tools and resources. This is exactly what you're looking for. So I can also sort of like help guide people to those sorts of things. Maybe in the future, we hire interns each summer, usually autistic and neurodivergent interns, to come out and do research for us and do some other work and get sort of like an internship experience. Maybe within the next couple of years, I'll grab a team of people whose job it is to go into our website and make this a little bit more organized.
Yeah, the database for constantly increasing input, when that input is exponentially variable. That's a tough database to program.
Yeah.
You need somebody who really really can wrap their heads around multi-dimensional databases. Yeah, but that's cool. Okay, so in the few minutes that we have left,
Mhm.
can we talk a little bit about being neurodivergent and parenting?
Yeah.
We don't have a ton of time left, and I hate to squish it into this little bit, but as someone who raised her children to adulthood without any of us understanding our identity, we can all look back and have our aha moments and understand things differently. But
Keep talking. I'll be right back. I can hear
yep.
you.
Okay. Yeah. So part of what I'm talking to other neurodivergent parents about is, there's so many dimensions to who's giving us advice, who's helping us, are there supports, all that kind of stuff. Even people who believe we shouldn't be having children. And I've in my book, I talk a little bit about, my perspectives for a long time, telling my kids, maybe don't have your own children. I didn't understand neurodivergence at the time at all. And all I knew is my unsupported self.
Right.
And my unsupported self felt so shaky and like I wasn't doing a good job all the time. And I looked at my kids and I'm like, you people look like me. I'm pretty sure you shouldn't have kids, right? You kind of look nervous and shaky yourselves. I'm pretty sure that like kids will explode your brain the same way. And so for most of their growing up, I was like, think super hard. Think super hard. Know yourself really well. Is this something you're actually going to be able to do? And I've come to understand that my feeling like I couldn't do certain stuff had to do with my experience, not my neurodivergence.
Right.
That an entirely different experience of being a parent would have been available to me. One, had I known my identity and that of my children, and two, if I had had appropriate support and good information.
So I was very fortunate from a research perspective. I was very fortunate that I got diagnosed, and then I quickly realized that my kids were also on the spectrum and started getting them diagnoses when my oldest was almost grown up, but my younger two were like just finishing elementary or going into middle school. And certainly before I had my diagnosis and before I understood myself, there were additional challenges that I was not responding to appropriately or well because I didn't know. Sometimes I go through sensory meltdowns, and the kids knew that there were some days that you just left dad alone because dad would blow up about nothing. And the reason like I was blowing up is because I was getting overwhelmed and stuff. And then, if someone's shouting or like traipsing through the house on the wrong day, I just like, and sometimes I'm like, you guys just have to leave me alone. Like I'm overwhelmed right now. I'm going to sit here on my computer and I'm going to play a silly game or something. I'm just kind of like waiting for my brain to calm down, but I didn't have the language for it. And I didn't myself kind of understand it. I did the best I could because being a parent was important to me. Being a good father was important to me. So I was certainly not through lack of effort and stuff, but I wasn't doing a very good job in my estimation, in part because I don't think we become really good parents until our kids are darn near grown up, because it takes that much time and effort to try to figure out what's the best way to raise this individual. And as soon as you do that for one and you try to apply the same thing to the next one, it doesn't work at all. So you almost have to like relearn the whole thing all over again. But much more importantly is once I got my diagnosis and was able to educate myself about some of the challenges and stuff typical of those of us in the autism spectrum and recognize, oh my gosh, this is something I struggle with. This is something that I didn't think about in those terms. And now I can see how that could do harm or make this particularly challenging. This is something I have to account for. This is something I have to plan for. I was better able to communicate with my kids and explain to them, hey, dad's not mad at you. He's not angry at you. It's just some days I'm suffering and I'm struggling. And you just got to kind of give me a little space and please don't take it personal. Like it doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It just means that I'm kind of struggling, and have those kind of conversations. So it was a huge turning point in raising them and stuff. And I think I think I did a much better job post-diagnosis, in part because I was getting better at being a parent as they got older, but I think also in part because it helped me identify and apply language to some things that I was struggling with. And now, you know, each of my three kids I have a very close relationship with. And they come to me for accommodations and supports and stuff. Sometimes they overwhelm me still. But at least they're a bit more mindful of that now and understanding of that most of the time. And I talk to so many autistic adults and so many autistic people who are estranged from their parents and just weren't able to find a way to communicate in such a manner that both sides were kind of understanding the other. So I recognize I'm very fortunate for that. And I credit a good portion of that to the fact that I did get diagnosed when I did. So I've parented both as a clueless person and as somebody who's like, oh, I see. And I much prefer the, oh, I see. It makes a lot of things easier. I can't even guess at where I would be today or where my kids would be today if I had not gotten that diagnosis. I can almost certainly say we wouldn't be as well off as we are. And each of my kids are doing the best they can with what they have, and they have challenges and they have struggles. But when you compare them to their peers, they're way ahead of the curve on that. And I don't necessarily think that we would have been able to help them get to that place if we didn't have the language and the understanding that we have.
I think that's such an important point. Coming from my standpoint of neurotypes instead of disorders or diseases and things like that, I struggle with the term diagnosis because it keeps us steeped in that medicalized thought process. And, you know, one of the things that I can do for people is I don't pretend I'm giving a diagnosis of any kind, but I now know enough about these different neurotypes that I can help people self-identify if that is their choice. And it's really interesting because I think part of what is hard right now for a lot of autistic people who are unsure if that is their identity is that validation can be very important. And how do we offer validation in a non-medicalized way? Because right now, everybody talks about the diagnosis because that is the current path to trying to figure yourself out. Unfortunately, not all diagnosticians actually know what they're doing. Not all diagnosticians understand enough or have good information going into it. So they might miss somebody like you or me. They may misunderstand and misidentify somebody with a personality disorder or something like that. And then the supports and the opportunities to help you become a little misguided. And so having said all that, I do think it's vitally important that people find their courage to figure themselves out, whether it's through a standardized diagnostic situation like you went through and your kids did, because I don't want to indicate at all that I feel that that's invalid. It's not. It's just the most common way right now. And I'm hoping we find additional ways, especially because there are barriers to getting that.
Yeah.
But if people, you know, I'm hoping part of what's going to happen within us is people are going to hear all of these different conversations, and some of them are going to go, oh, I wonder if that's me, right? They're going to hear enough.
About 20% of my interactions with the public we always invite people, like, if you think you might be neurodivergent, if you think you might be autistic and you're wondering, how do I explore that? How do I figure that out? We always encourage people, like, you can reach out to us. I'd be happy to kind of talk you through that. You know, I walk through that journey myself. I've helped hundreds of other people walk through that journey. It's one of those journeys that I think that while you're walking it, it can be extremely stressful, and it can be extremely, it can be confusing. It can cause a lot of anxiety. The journey itself can be rough. but I like to say, like, the destination is so worth it. And if you can connect with other people who've walked the same path, they can give you tips and tricks that can help you potentially avoid some of the pitfalls. And plus, it's also just so wholesome to talk to somebody who's like walked that same journey and says, "Oh, I so know what you're feeling. Oh gosh, yeah, I was feeling the same sort of thing too." And I always stress to them, it was the greatest thing to happen to me in terms of my trajectory and stuff. It wasn't a pretty journey. But my ability to understand myself and paradoxically, almost like in parallel, understand everybody else. Oh, this is an autism thing. So that means most people are not dealing with this. Okay. What that person did the other day is starting to make a lot more sense. If this is not a variable in their equations, it was extremely helpful to that. And I would probably say the most important thing is it normalized me. And I didn't realize how badly I needed that until I had it. When you meet people who are like you, who have the same gifts and challenges that you do, and you get to know them and you see these are wonderful, beautiful, talented people. And they have some of the same shortcomings that you do, and they have some of the same struggles, but look at how awesome and amazing they are. Maybe I'm not such a terrible person. A lot of us, particularly those of us who are not diagnosed in childhood, we tend to look at our shortcomings and stuff as failures, personal failures. I like to equate it to, it's almost like we're in a wheelchair hating on ourselves because we can't stand up and grab something off the top shelf, never stopping to realize I can't do that because it's really hard and complicated. And I shouldn't hate myself for it's like being mad at myself because I'm not 7 feet tall, or being mad at myself because I don't have wings. Like that's not a very helpful sort of thing. And we do such a good job of torturing ourselves as it is. We need to push back on that whenever we can, in whatever way we can. So yeah, it was just like meeting people and just sort of realizing, no, I'm not defective. I'm just an unusual flavor of human. And here are other people of the same flavor, and look at how awesome they are. Maybe I'm not such a bad person. That was a really important pivot that I needed to make in my life. So anytime that I could help somebody else make that same pivot, yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't be where I'm at today if I didn't have kind-hearted souls at some critical junctures helping me find a path out of the situation I was in. So I could spend the rest of my life trying to help other people, and I'll be blissfully happy doing it. And I have a feeling that a lot of those people are the same way. Once they get out of that, they're delighted to turn around and help the next person kind of go through. And I think that's how, we're talking about building community here. We're talking about building community with knowledge and intent and understanding. I'm hard at work trying to turn Nashville into some sort of autism utopia. We got a bunch of vibrant communities here, but we haven't cornered the market on that. I found so many other wonderful little communities throughout the world that are supporting each other. That's one of the things I think about on the side too, is how do we get these folks? We're talking about a group of people who naturally were not very sociable. We're not the best at organizing things where groups of people come together and kind of work together and stuff. That's actually one of the things that most of us to one degree or another struggle with. So how do we help folks who need that and that's not necessarily their wheelhouse? That is something I also kind of think a lot about, because I feel like when we can connect and support each other and help each other, a lot of those unanswered questions start finding answers and stuff.
That's amazing. I could talk to you forever. So probably we should cut it here, because 3 hours later we'll still be here having tons of fun. But you have to get back to your life and me to mine. Thank you so much for all you shared. I'm really hoping we will find ways to work together in the future. I think there's great possibility for that.
Yeah, if you want to do another one of these or just chat about whatever, just reach out to Colette. She'll find a spot in my calendar and we'll reconnect.
That's great. Yeah. Your assistant Colette has been wonderful, wonderful help, and I appreciate her very much. So thank you. And I can't wait for people to meet you through this little virtual experience. And I hope that people find comfort and resource through what they've learned with you today.
Yeah, and please feel free to throw out my website or my email or whatever, and encourage people, like, if they have any questions or need any help, they can reach out to me. I don't proclaim to have all the answers, but there's a really good degree of probability that if I don't have an answer, I probably know somebody who can give you a satisfying answer.